Hello and welcome everyone to session number 2 or episode number 2. It is now the new year and we are focusing on harnessing insatiable leadership, reflecting on the past and shaping the future. And now we are going to be exploring this is our New Year special. So we're joined again with Susanna. Lovely to have you with us again, Susanna. And we are going to be looking at how to elevate your leadership in 2025. So if you haven't had too merry a festive season, you might remember the 6 traits we spoke about in our last session. You might remember the transformational dimensions of impact. You see, now I'm going to get tested here. Impact, performance, and momentum. I see. I behaved myself over the festive season, and today what we're going to be doing is looking at putting a lot of that into action, into how we show up for 2025. So, just a brief reminder to everyone that this, if you haven't seen the first episode, check it out. It was a great episode. We really got to learn about these 6 traits in the incredible book that Susanna's put together, Insatiable Leaders. And we talked about what insatiable leaders are and the 6 traits that largely define them. And so check that out if you haven't seen it. Important foundation to today's session. Want to remind you all that the views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely my own and of those of my contributors, and that the podcast is in no way affiliated or endorsed by any one of my employers or clients, and that it is my own independent effort. Just to introduce you to Susanna briefly again. So she's an executive coach and founder of the Insatiable Leaders boutique coaching firm, where she helps advance growth-driven leaders and forward-thinking organizations. She's had over 15 years experience in banking, professional services, people development, and has coached and led senior executives in large organizations like Goldman Sachs, EY, Meta, Alphabet or Google, PwC, and that her practice is formed around these 6 traits and insatiable leadership. She's got a master's degree in quantitative finance. Of course, I knew I was going to trip over the qualitative versus quantitative. I knew it. Before we even started, I knew it. So master's degree in quantitative finance. So she's got a big head on her shoulders, and is a certified coach through the International Coaching Federation and the Institute of Leadership and Management. So thank you for joining us yet again, Susanna. So we are going to now explore, in your book, you laid up this great foundation around, the 6 traits of, leadership that you've identified through the years of experience that you had dealing with, high-performing executives. And you talked about these 3 dimensions that of the impact, performance, and momentum that really help them transform organizations. And that whole piece is really about how to reflect on, how you're showing up in each one of these traits. Either, you've got more of the dark side of the trait, where it's not driving at its optimum, or for example, if you're performance driven, dark side of that will be that you're putting a lot of pressure on your teams, or you're not feeling like you're going fast enough, etc. And it's really helping to lay out how you've shown up and how you go about showing up. And you then, next section of the book, you've got 3 parts. You've got this elevating your vision, your identity, and elevating your environment. And it's really talking about how you start to nurture and grow these traits and show up more effectively as a leader in having that impact that you're looking for, and that performance and that momentum. So do you want to give us an overview of what those 3 pillars are and what they mean in the context of leadership?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. So these 3 pillars, elevate your vision, elevate your identity, and elevate your environment, are the vehicles that are going to equip leaders channel these traits so that they increase respectively impact, performance, and momentum. So if I create a competitive business vision, then it will equip me to drive more impact into my industry, into my clients, based on the services and products that I'm delivering. If I elevate my identity as a leader, I'm going to increase constantly my performance in those situations where are more demanding, where are more complex, and is going to show me ways in which how can I become more resourceful in a world that's constantly changing. It represents a challenge for me as a leader to create next level results. And then the environment part. So the environment is the conditions under which we operate. And the way I refer to it in the book is the people I work, my team members, my peers, sometimes the systems, I haven't gone into that detail into the book, but it's also the systems and the technology that we have in our companies that are supporting our ambitions. If I
Hmm.
elevate my environment and the people with me, I'm gonna increase that momentum to get to stay ahead in a world that's constantly evolving. So that's what these three pillars represent. I also like to refer to them as leading your business, leading yourself, and leading others. So some people may connect more to one way or the other, but I think it tackles in a way the responsibility of a leader of how I lead my business unit, how I become a better leader, and how I lead
Hmm.
the people I'm interacting with in my business ecosystem.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so this is kind of the heart of the framework that you sort of built in this book, is it's around identifying first, becoming familiar with and understanding for yourself individually what these six traits mean to you and how you show up with them. But the real transformation for the individual, the person reading the book, the leader, is these three pillars in trying to help them really enhance the way they're showing up on those six traits and on those three dimensions that we mentioned before. And I like how you started mapping the traits to the individual pillars themselves as well: vision, context, and leadership, which is great. So why do you think it's essential to elevate all three to achieve transformational growth in 2025?
It's a very good question. Because I always I said it in the previous episode. So I've used many sketches that I've done to my sessions, and the way that I picture this three pillar model is as if leaders wanted to climb a mountain change, representing the
Hmm.
next peak that they want to achieve in their careers, for their organizations, for their clients. And if you wanna climb to the next peak, you need to understand what is that peak that I want to climb. So that's the vision. Is the vision part of it in the vision, and not
Hmm.
only pointing it out, but also raising your aspiration and even aiming higher than what you have set yourself to. Then there is
Hmm.
an element of when I've established that peak, is about who do I need to become as a climber to get to that peak. It represents a new challenge, the conditions may
Right.
be different. So it's an element
Mm.
about, yeah, having a vision is great, but now if I want to bring it to life, how I become the leader who is going to operate in a more challenging and more complex domain, and that in which that vision is taking place. And then there is the element of the environment. So if I want to climb a more challenging peak, I need an equipment that is going to enable me to do that. Maybe I need to change um, my tools, my rucksack, the clothes that I'm wearing. So it's really adapting and upgrading your environment, sorry, your resources to the peak you're climbing. And that environment for me, it represents the people we are working with, your peers, the units of excellence, the peer groups and the team units in which you're operating. If you
Hmm.
don't elevate your team around you, you may be very competent at establishing a very ambitious vision and becoming the leader who will get there. But the environment sets performance. And if you don't elevate it, then your performance is going to be capped to the level at which you are, at which you have set your environment. So for me, these three pillars need to operate together. Just framing a leadership growth based on what I want without connecting it to a vision is not going to stretch you to grow if you don't set yourself an exciting peak to climb.
Mm.
Just focusing on elevating the environment without the context of a vision you want to aim for, I think it loses its strength and the fuel that is gonna drive you forward. So the model has a three pillar, but it's anchored in an exciting vision that is stretching me as a leader to transform as a leader, and is stretching my organization.
That's a really great analogy. I quite like that because it really does speak to why they all need to be in place. You can't
Mm.
just be focused on the one. So let's talk about elevating your vision. How can leaders clarify and expand their vision for 2025? I know a lot of leaders who are really great performers, but lots of them can sometimes be found at this crossroad where
Mm.
they just don't know where the next step should be or what they should be doing.
Yeah.
So what are the steps they can take to align their visions with long-term organizational and personal goals, etc.?
Yeah. So there are three strategies that I explain in the book. One is taking the stand. The second one is stretching your vision a bit more, and then is declare it with a feedback strategy. So I'll go one by one. So for me, taking a stand is really determining why are you in leadership. So why are you in leadership in this 2025? What's the step
Mm.
you take as a leader beyond hitting my numbers? and growing my team. It's really what are we after and what's my cause of leadership. So each person uses a different name, calling, purpose, whatever it works for you. I refer to it as a stand because it's what's anchoring you in your day to day, and is like that inner compass that we referred to in the previous episode. And for me, that stand needs to be found at the intersection of what are my organizational aspirations, but what are also my personal aspirations. So what's going to provide a competitive edge to my business unit or my company, depending on the leadership position that you have, what's going to put it ahead of the competition, or is going to optimize the performance of the internal efficiency of the company. And for that, leaders need to reflect about what's happening in the market, where are our clients, what they need. And it's about asking themselves transformational questions that are a bit introspective about that state of the market and the competition, so that they draw the answers. They have these answers. I always say that we are on a mountain of gold with a lot of information about perspective we have gained, knowledge we have, conversations we have had, but sometimes we don't access that information because we are in autopilot going from meeting to meeting. So it's really creating that space to access that information through questions that I've included in the book that equip leaders to shift their focus about what's important for their companies. And like it's done for the organizational side of things, then it's also it's about doing the same with my personal aspirations. Because if I don't craft a vision or a stand that is not aligned with what's important to me, what I care about, what's important for me to transform my industry, transform my company, that is aligned to my expertise, to my personal values, it's like if we didn't put, if we lose the fuel that is gonna equip us to grow during 2025. So it's finding that intersection that is going to enable us to both provide, to address the organizational needs, but also our own aspirations. So that's the first strategy. And then the second one is really stretching those aspirations. What I see many leaders as they start the new years is that they go for the next logical step in their journey. So they stretch their targets a bit, a percentage, a bit or a lot, but it's like almost like a logical step of what I've done in the previous year. So what I want to do is really stretching your thinking about, besides what you have achieved, tell me something that's going to excite you to share at the end of 2025. So if we are in December 2025, what are 3 things that would bring a smile to your face about what you have accomplished?
I like that.
Besides hitting targets and creating business, which is very important, but it's really stretching them beyond their logical steps or the day to day. And in order to do that, we need to go to that third strategy of declaring a future back strategy. It's very impossible. It's very difficult to create that stretch just looking from where we are today, January to February. So what I like doing is bringing them to the future, to that December 2025, and saying to them, from the future, tell me what you have accomplished and be backwards, so that you craft your plan for the year. And instead of seeing obstacles, which is what we see from January forward, you see what you have accomplished. So that's the way in which they can really frame that vision.
I found this year I've come up with this idea, and it's probably a known thing, but it's somehow I sort of came up with it in my own mind, that I am not doing New Year's resolutions.
Me neither.
Based on the standard way of doing things. I'm focusing on, what am I looking forward to next year? At the end of the year, what are things that I am looking forward to accomplishing?
Yeah.
So kind of turning the whole performance aspect of, these are my goals, to what are things that I'm looking forward to accomplishing, to bring that joy element back into it. I think that resonated a lot with me, with what you were saying around the, what are you looking forward to doing? It's bringing that, it's just reframing it to make it a little bit more, something you're looking forward to accomplishing, and maybe not being so hard on yourself as to, you have to, didn't get all my New Year's resolutions this year, snap, And I think on a personal level as well, I mean, maybe a holiday you're looking forward to, something that drives the year along in a positive way.
Totally. And what I found very powerful, Richard, is speaking about those in present tense. It's really picturing yourself in December 2025, with a glass of champagne or a cocktail or just a coffee, and really celebrating what are 3 things that I want to say in December 2025. So your brain is thinking in a way that you have already accomplished them. And it seems like it's not going to make like a massive difference, but it does when you
It does.
force
Absolutely.
people. I don't want to use the word force, but it's what I do. I encourage people to use present tense to speak from the future. It really creates something in them about, I want to be able to say this in present tense one day in reality.
Yeah, I think it kind of also breaks down or brings us reality to the fact that you've achieved it,
Yeah,
because you're speaking on the stance of achievement versus I would like to do that. It's like, well, no, we've done that, and
yeah,
it changes the mind's chemistry, if you will, for lack
exactly.
of a scientific term. But
Yeah,
it definitely does provide a more positive, attainable view to things.
yeah, exactly.
So that's fantastic, and moving that to now. So that's elevating your vision. So for 2025, what we're saying is like there's 2 or 3. Did you mention, was there 3
Yeah.
techniques that you've got? So the one was the taking a stand.
Mhm.
The other one was
Stretching your
the
aspirations.
stretching, and the final one.
Is the clear division from the future, create a future back
Got
strategy.
you. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So those that in the book, in the publication, we really sit and harness that thinking for leaders, again, putting them in the fishbowl, taking the time out to sit and clarify and get that content. That's fantastic. And with that, you've now elevated your vision, so to speak. So you're working in a lot more purpose. You've got a lot more clarity as to where you're going. Next one, elevating your identity. So how can leaders rethink their identity and mindset, or become more clear on what their identity is? 'Cause identity is such an important element for me,
It
really
is.
close to my heart, because it really is the engine that drives everything we do. So what can they do to
Yeah.
start focusing in more on this and getting more clarity on that?
Yeah, I wanted to say first, I love that you say this, because for me, this is the chapter about elevating your identity. Probably is the more complex one to understand, but it's the essential one, and it may be the one that may bring more abstract concepts, even if I've aimed to explain them in a structured way with visuals. But it's something that may be easier to say, oh, I'll read this later. But for me, it's the core of leadership. So for me, identity, the way I understand it, is your self-conception. And I know this is very broad, but it's really your perception of who you are in every moment in time, which include how you see yourself, how you see others, your views about the world, your history. So it's really who you are every moment in time that determines how you behave in a specific situation based on how you are wired. So it's your wiring, if you want to call it that way. And linked to the identity formation, which is something that happens as you evolve with your history, your background, there are the formation of habits. And habits is the responses that you have learned to engage based on that identity that you have formed. So what leaders need to understand in order to elevate their identity is how their inner system fabricates results and prevents them from creating new results. Because now
Hmm.
that we have framed this new peak with the new vision, it's about, okay, how do I become that climber and equip myself to go to that next challenge? And for that, I need to do something different. And what I see many leaders doing is, I want to know what I need to do to achieve this objective, what I need to do differently. And that's great. But for me, there is a much more important question, which is, what's stopping me from creating the results that I want to create despite my efforts from applying new strategies? And that's where the identity comes in. So the identity is held in place at 3 levels. So one is behavioral. So what are the behaviors that I engage? But those behaviors and many leaders may be aware with this concept of mental responses, emotional responses. But for me, there is another level, which is somatic responses. So what's conditioning your body? So the way you behave and your habits are ingrained at a behavioral level, mental level, emotional level, and somatic level. So if you don't
Hmm.
understand how at each moment in time your identity, your mental responses, your emotional responses, and even your own body is holding you back from responding differently, you're never going to create those results. So the biggest step that I encourage leaders to take in 2025 is really understanding how they operate and why they operate this way. And our identity, it doesn't respond to our ambitions and where we want. It responds to our longings, deeper longings, or fears that we want to prevent from engaging. So if you have an objective that is not aligned to that puts how do I explain this? if you're aiming for an objective, but your inner identity is triggered because it's a scare of something, of rejection, of how it's going to be seen, you're never going to be able to take those steps that are going to enable you to achieve that vision. So you need to understand how you're thinking, how you're behaving in every situation, so that you start challenging the way at which you're looking at things and challenging that identity so that you can upgrade it.
Mhm. And you've got quite a clear framework, sort of cognitive behavioral um, sort of coaching in action here. You've got a framework in there to help actually highlight these different, help you reflect and understand and highlight these triggers and these thoughts and how they're resulting in certain behaviors and how you can then start to tweak and enhance that so that you're showing up in the way in which you're wanting to
Yeah.
be showing up. I noticed it was quite a comprehensive approach that you had in terms of identifying these elements and shifting them very slowly as well.
Exactly. Once you have, so the steps are identifying those situations in which I want to show up differently, realizing what's happening in my system that is preventing me from behaving differently. And once that
Hmm.
challenge is taking place, I start seeing new possibilities. But if I never challenge and confront what's keeping me in a habit loop that is not helping me to grow, it's difficult for me to explore new possibilities. It's like a dance. I explain this in the book. It's like in order to see new possibilities, you need to have challenged the ones that are keeping you in a box or are keeping you limited from creating those results that you want.
And as a matter of interest, so identity, I think when people read that as well, there's a lot of, your values, your strengths, knowing yourself as well, sort of built up into that. How does that kind of show up in the way you're trying to address this within the book?
Yeah, thank you. So it relates to that concept of we need to understand how all those behaviors, mental responses, emotional responses are ingrained at a deeper level based on those values of those subconscious drivers of what's important to us, how we want to be seen, how we want to be recognized, because it's all that at a very subtle level
Hmm.
that we need to challenge and intervene at in order to explore new ways of responding and behavior. So that's why it's not a matter of what are the habits that I want to build and what are the behaviors that I want to equip myself with. We need to see what's the confrontation between that vision that I have and something
Hmm.
that I believe at the core of myself, that is aligned with who I am, that is preventing me from taking those steps towards that vision. Maybe it's something that gives me recognition that I need to stop doing in order to embrace new behaviors, that I'm scared of the recognition that I may lose.
Hmm.
So it's really understanding how our all identity, outdated and identity, is anchored in a way of thinking, in a value system that needs to be upgraded. It's not eliminated completely, but refined and upgraded so that you update it to that vision that you want to pursue. And that's why it's so important that that vision is aligned with your aspirations and what you want, because if
Hmm.
not, that transformation is not going to be worth it, because you're going
Sure.
to be
It's got to be
preferring
artificial,
to
right?
stay connected to
Mm.
what's important to you. That's the vision almost act like a magnet to pull you
Hmm.
out of a old version of yourself, that is stopping you from achieving that objective.
Yeah, perfect. And then, so elevating your environment. So, what adjustments can leaders make to their environments to foster that growth and innovation? Um, you know, what kind of tools and what are some things that they can consider for 2025 to start getting their environments elevated to help them to reach that vision and
Yeah.
enable
So
them to transform?
for me, there are three key strategies. So one is how they develop their team members one to one, and
Hmm.
they become coaches or their team members. Becoming coaches for me means leading the conversation with their team members through questions, so that their team members are drawn out with questions and they can access how they think, how they behave, their aspirations. And it's applying this three-pillar model of vision, identity, and conditions to how they would coach their team members. And it's really asking questions that enable their team members to frame a plan for the year based on their own aspirations, and equip their team members to understand what are their developmental edges that are not enable them to grow. And through this process, what they are doing is building the autonomy and the leadership criteria of their team members so that they can take on more responsibilities and more demanding tasks, so that them as leaders they can go to the next level. Because if
Mhm.
they don't engrave the environment and they don't build a team of leaders who are autonomous and they can take more out of their plate that requires more leadership criteria, they're going to be stuck from going to the next level. So there is that element of one-to-one interactions and shifting the conversation from project status or client status to let's speak about your transformation and how you need to grow as a leader.
Mhm.
And then the second strategy is how they build units of excellence, both with their team members or their peer groups. And by units of excellence, I refer to units in which the dialogues and the dynamics that we engage in are promoting agility, transformation, innovation. And
Mhm.
in order to build that, they need to understand which ones are those meetings in which the dialogues need to change, or the
Yeah.
dialogues are not driving that innovation, that ability, that agility, that challenge, and what are the dynamics that are preventing that. And that happens from them stepping out to the visual. And in the book is full of dynamics and exercises that will enable leaders to really use questions to identify different aspects that we have been mentioning.
Mhm.
And from those insights that they get from the visual, every time they go into a new meeting with their teams and their peers, they can redirect the way the conversation is happening. And
Mhm.
the last strategy is that concept that many leaders don't like a lot, which is mastering the political chessboard. I intentionally kept using this concept because while I don't think that politics is an element of a chessboard in which someone wins and loses, I love the element of that you need to know who is in your network and you need to adopt a politician mindset. And for me, leaving ideologies and ethics of some politicians on the side, for me, the core of the politician is someone who gains a vote for a vision they have. And as a leader, if you want to drive change in 2025, you need to be able to gain votes from a vision you have that's going to benefit your organization, your business unit, and it needs to be beyond yourself. So many
Mhm.
leaders try to move away from that idea of politics, of being a politician. But for me, it's something that it can really equip them to grow into someone that is gonna help them to engage people in change. So that's how you engage the environment and move by move in the chessboard with different players that it's important that you engage, or different coalitions. You're driving the company or the unit or the division to a new place at the end of the year.
But growing to have influence and
Yes.
within the realms of the organizational's goals. So not your own goals, but if it's aligned to the vision and the goals of the organization.
Mhm.
Those kinds of politics. Yeah.
Mm.
And what are the so you mentioned a few things again, the fishbowl being a really great exercise to take stock of your environment and leaders having that environment and looking at how they can show up a little bit more to start growing their influence on the chessboard, if you will. How do you think leaders should be creating ecosystems that support their goals in 2025?
Hmm. So for me, it's about them stepping out and identifying what are the conditions that are not in place for their environment supporting those goals, and what are the elements that are missing. Is it a matter of accountability, of coordination, alignment, systems,
Mm.
culture, transparency, and that
And maybe
only sorry.
tooling, for example, might be a problem, right? Teams are frustrated because the tooling's not working the way it's supposed to.
Exactly.
You're not processing the orders as quickly as you're supposed to, or whatever else it might be. Those could be things that perhaps need elevating and
Exactly.
identification. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with the environment is that for me it goes beyond going into the visuals and just reflecting. You really need to have a systemic view of the environment. You need to understand how each department connects with another department. Team members are connecting between them. So it's like bringing that visual to a helicopter, and from the helicopter almost overseeing the whole organization. And the beauty
Mm.
here is that while the system is complex, the way you drive change in a complex system is by identifying micro maneuvers or micro interactions in your day-to-day conversations with your team members, your peer groups in those units of excellence, or with your peers that are going to start changing the system. So sometimes what I see many leaders what many leaders confront is that they are a bit overwhelmed, or they feel limited by changing the culture or changing the policies, or it seems overwhelming because it is, and that feeling can take them to a place where they feel blocked or unable to introduce any changes. And the beauty of changing that mass system is by introducing small changes in your everyday interactions. But for that, you need to be intentional about which ones those interactions are with your team members, your peers, or different stakeholders you want to engage. So it's a combination of, I need to step out from the ocean, observe that business ecosystem, really asking myself the questions that are going to equip me to look at the ecosystem from a new way that is going to provide me the insights to understand the dynamics. I need to change the dialogues. I need to change the questions I can ask my team members, the questions I can ask my stakeholders to understand what they are after, so that we build common missions. And then it's introducing those small actions little by little. It's not going to change by tomorrow, but if you take small maneuvers little by little, if you redirect a boat 1 degree at a time, you're changing its direction. So it's a bit that same analogy.
Thanks for that. There are two other abilities that leaders need that you've mentioned. You call them the meta abilities. One is nonlinear time management and presence. And I think these are things that fall across all of the elevation pillars. It's something that's sort of ingrained in everything. Can you tell us a little bit more about these two abilities and how leaders need to use these to show up effectively in 2025?
Yeah, so these two meta abilities are like growth enablers for leaders to use this model, or to make the most of this 3-pillar model. Not only with every reaching a peak, but once they reach a peak, the hallmark of insatiability is that eagerness to constantly be growing. So once you achieve an aspiration or an objective, you're going to be thinking about the next one. So these two meta abilities that I'll explain in detail later, they are like enablers that equip you to reach the peak you want, not only once, but constantly if you apply them properly. So in order to introduce changes in their business, how they're leading themselves and how they're leading others, you need time to reflect, and you need time to do things differently. And one of the trending topics that I hear in leadership is that leaders don't have time. So the aspect about nonlinear time management is a different perspective to managing time that leaders have. I've seen many techniques that are about understanding the task, observing the task, dissecting the task, so that you delegate, you break it down, you batch based on similar tasks. But what I observe with that is that leaders, they don't manage how they perceive each one of these tasks. So for me, nonlinear time management is really challenging how you're perceiving your relationship to each one of the tasks based on your identity, based on your values, based on what you think that's important. And if you never challenge that, you're never going to rise above that linearity of tasks that go until forever. So that's for me, nonlinear time management is really an alternative way of managing your time that is not about productivity, it's not about optimizing minutes, it's really about a radical change in how you're leading yourself with your time, and dissecting the time choices you're making and why you're making them. Not because of this task, but what's behind those time choices. Because sometimes it's a need for approval, it's a need for pleasing others, it's a need for looking productive when you should be driving impact rather than being productive. It's a need from proving that you can handle everything. And those traps, if they are not challenged, they can trap leaders in their calendars. So that's one metability, and the other metability for me is presence, which is the demetability. And I don't refer to presence as that gravitas that you need to demonstrate when you are leading or commanding a room, but is that inner state of calm and awareness that connects you with your business, yourself, and the system you're operating in, that enables you to understand what's happening and reveals new possibilities for transformation. And that presence equips leaders with an ability to understand what's happening in their ecosystem, in their business, in how they're operating, in their inner drivers, their mental responses, their habits, and what's happening, how their team members are responding, what's not working in their units, and we equip them to gain new insights into the changes they can introduce. So ideally, what I suggest in the book is going into the fishbowl to reflect about it. Once you get into the habit of reflecting in the moment, that's when you are being present. So you can drive change from preparing or from with hindsight, understanding what happened, what went wrong, and then doing it next time better. But if you're present in the moment, you don't need that time. So for me, presence is that mastery of being in the moment, understanding what's happening, and being so connected to the changes that you can introduce that you don't then need time to keep reflecting about it. But that's
Right.
big challenge, considering the rhythm that we live in.
So let me get this right. So we've got nonlinear time management, which is really about bringing more context and awareness of context into the tasks that you're busy managing on an ongoing basis to make sure that you're bringing the right context to decisions you're making around how you're using your time. Presence is really about the state and ability to be present, but in a way that you're able to again drive that context and that understanding and be aware of your emotions, being aware of what's leading you in a given moment. So when we're looking at the three pillars of vision, of your identity, I think it's probably very strongly aligned to identity, because if you're talking about different habits and behaviors, you need to be very present in order to pick up on the triggers and quickly move into that shift of behavior, etc. It's a very intentional thing. And so the practice, what you're saying, is the practice of being present and having that reflective time sort of strengthens that muscle to help you be present in order to enact a lot of the guidance and so forth that you're providing throughout the publication, is what I'm hearing and hoping I'm understanding.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's really helpful. So if you are looking at 2025 and you are wanting to show up more effectively as a leader, we've gone through how we can reflect on our previous year through the 6 traits and identify where we're showing up more on the dark side, the shadow side of those traits, or where we're showing up really well, or maybe we need to show up a little bit more. We've looked at the 3 dimensions for transformation, and how we might be boxing ourselves in with our traits, right? So those are great reflection things that we can do for 2024. 2025, we're looking at how can we start to elevate our vision and get more clarity around what we're trying to go towards, how we stretch ourselves, how we, get a stand on our vision and where we're trying to move forward towards. We need to elevate our identity, understand based on our vision how we're acting, why we're acting the way we are, and what habits do we need to start shifting and changing in order for us to start showing up the way in which we're wanting to show up as leaders. And then we need to reflect on how and plan on how for 2025 our environment can be elevated by reviewing the tools we're using, the teams we've got in place, and all these different things that they're supposed to be there to support us in achieving our vision that we're setting out. And all along this whole journey, having nonlinear time management, so bringing context into our time decision making and so forth, and having that ongoing presence around what we're thinking about, why are we thinking about it that way, and being able to in the moment shift and so forth our discussions and so on. All of that is kind of encapsulated in what the plan for FY25 is going to be, right? If we're sitting down and going through your framework, how am I doing, Susanna? Do I get a certificate at the end? Do I get a badge?
You do, yeah. As I hear you, just
excellent.
That's pretty challenging. I wish everyone luck, but yeah, that's I think what is I think it's quite important to tackle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Susanna. Thank you so much. This has been really informative, and I think through anyone that I've interviewed on leadership, there are 2 key elements in all of this that is so crucially important for people to get right. Is that putting the time aside for that reflection, that fishbowl. I love the fishbowl idea. Putting the time aside to get in your fishbowl and be reflective and journal and do all these things to help you understand, and using things like your publication as a guide for those reflective moments. And I found this has been very helpful for me as well in reflecting around how I want my performance to be in FY25 and where I can make improvements from FY. I'm saying FY because I'm stuck in the corporate mind here, not financial year. For year 2024 or year 2025, I probably said FY the whole way through the financial year. But yeah, for great exercise to reflect on 2024 and how now we're going to look at how we're going to show up for 2025. So thank you so much for that, Susanna. And I'll be sure to share, how people can engage with you and so forth on all our links as well. I hope that this is an outstanding 2025 for you and for all of you who are watching and listening out there. Let this be the year that you find clarity, and looking forward to continuing our search throughout the year. Until next time, thank you very much, everyone, and a great Happy New Year. Bye-bye.